Rain braided the city into shining strands, and the mariposa let the night in like a secret it loved to keep. Velvet swallowed sound, brass stitched it back together, and a trumpet held a note that felt like forgiveness practicing. He took the stool beside her without touching. Heat has its own etiquette when it's still deciding what it is. She had a white lily resting on the bar, its cool petals beating with the room's breath. Satin the color of midnight skimmed her frame and made every shadow a choice. "I didn't plan to come," she said, eyes on the back bar mirror where the room doubled. Dancers melting into smoke, card players folding their luck, a waitress floating through light like a patient comet. "My feet did," he answered. The quip was almost a prayer. They tuned themselves slowly, two instruments listening first, then daring a chord. She aligned her glass perfectly in its ring, as if the night could be persuaded into symmetry. He admitted, soft enough to be safe, that the sound of her laugh had once tilted the architecture of his restraint. She admitted that mornings were longer without him, an arithmetic of absence. Outside, the rain brightened the street to a slick invitation. Inside, the trumpet slid from blue to something warmer, and her perfume found the air between them, floral with a memory of fire. He didn't offer his hand, they weren't that honest yet. But his shoulder turned toward her, a lesson in gravity. The lily's shadow cut a neat blade across the bar top. He wanted to own the mark it would leave on his palm. "Tomorrow?" she tested, voice balanced on the edge of hope and habit. "If we earn it," he said. They spoke of small houses neither of them had ever wanted until now, of mean little gardens with stubborn roses, of doors that remembered who came home. Not promises, blueprints scribbled on cocktail napkins. The room hushed around the shape of them. When they finally turned to face each other, the mirror stopped mattering. Her gaze was a slow opening. His was careful and then unable to pretend. He reached up to smooth a strand of hair at her temple and stopped a breath away, asking without words. She tipped her face that impossible inch. The first kiss was a match struck in a quiet room. Small, necessary, lighting more than itself. The second trusted the light. Their foreheads rested together as if the moment had hands. "Walk with me," she said. "Anywhere," he said, meaning it, and the trumpet let them go with a note that felt like a door opening. The rain had gentled from confession to steady company. They shared an umbrella, a fragile roof that made them co-conspirators, bringing their bodies near without requiring a verdict. The city steamed, taxis hissed, late diners kept their promises to neon. He matched his stride to hers. She matched her shoulder to his. They were ungainly with wanting and shy with it, which made it better. Her building was old enough to have opinions, ornate ironwork, a foyer that smelled of lemons and forgotten letters. In the elevator they watched numbers rise like a throat swallowing. Neither spoke. Their hands were close enough to learn each other without touching. The way his fingers flexed when he was deciding. The way her knuckles smoothed when she felt sure. Inside her apartment the quiet had a shape. Lamps cast small cities on the hardwood. The windows held the rain like a careful frame. She set the lily in a vase, the kind of tenderness that gives a night its thesis. He took off his coat as if the fabric might misunderstand him and draped it on the chair. They were suddenly shy again, as if approaching an altar built out of light and breath. "Tea?" she asked. "Only if it's code for staying," he said, then winced at his own audacity. "It is," she answered, a smile that let him keep it. They moved through her rooms with beginner's reverence. The kettle clicked. Cupboards answered. When she handed him a mug, their fingers finally touched. It wasn't cinematic, no thunderclap, but the smallest charges are often the truest. The contact lingered a heartbeat longer than manners, then two, and the second heartbeat made everything else decide its name. He traced the rim of his cup to give his hands a task. She stood close enough that he could feel the draft of her breathing, the silver thread of it in the hush. He said her name. It sounded like he'd practiced it alone. She set her cup down and stepped into him. No flourish, just arrival. They kissed again, steadier, and the room changed key. His palm found the small of her back through the satin, and the fabric learned his hand the way water learns a shoreline. Her fingers slid to his jaw, mapping the geography of certainty. They were careful, then less careful, then simply true. When they paused, foreheads leaning, the clock made a polite attempt at existing and failed. "Stay," she said. "I was already staying," he said. They didn't race the moment. They let it become itself. Lamps dimmed, rain softened, tea cooling untouched. When they finally crossed the last inches to her bedroom, it was with the trust of people who understood that tenderness is the bravest tempo. Clothes loosened because they were in the wrong register. Shadows lengthened to be kind. What happened then was the grown, grateful kind of love, slow, mutual, unhurried, told in breath and closeness rather than spectacle, a door closed to the world and open to each other. Outside, the city kept its reign. Inside, two hearts revised their definitions of home. Morning made lace out of the curtains. The lily in the vase had opened a little more, as if it too believed in continuance. He woke to the warmth of her head on his shoulder, their breaths newly fluent. For a while they stayed precisely where they were, collecting the pieces that the night had quietly rearranged. "Coffee," she murmured, voice soft with sleep and the kind of ease that makes a life possible. He went to the kitchen and made it like a promise he wanted to keep. She watched from the doorway, wearing the oversized shirt he hadn't realized he owned until it looked better on her. Domesticity, the most dangerous intimacy of all, found them without force. 2 mugs, a shared spoon, the pleasant indecision of which window to stand at while they sipped. They talked the way people do when the world is new and you're afraid to startle it. She told him about the first time she'd heard that trumpet at the Mariposa and felt something unclench. He told her about the quiet he'd lived with so long he'd mistaken it for peace. They didn't audition for each other, they testified. And where the testimony threatened to become performance, they paused and held hands instead. "Do you think love is a house or a road?" she asked. "A house with a road passing through it," he said, surprising himself. "And a kind front door." She smiled into her mug. "With a squeaky step we pretend we'll fix." "We will fix it," he said, not defensively, just certain in a way that didn't frighten either of them. They made breakfast. He burned the first toast. She pretended that was a strategy for butter absorption. They danced barefoot while the kettle sighed. No music, just the rhythm they'd learned in the night and were brave enough to practice in the morning. When they kissed, it was easy, not less intense but differently lit. Daylight makes truth show its freckles. Later, they wandered the neighborhood under a shy sun, pointing at apartments and giving them improbable lives. A narrow brick place with climbing ivy became the house where they would one day keep too many books. A small park bench became the site of an argument they hadn't had yet and the apology that would follow. They were writing a future on air, knowing full well that air can't keep ink, and deciding to write anyway. Back at the apartment, the lily perfumed the room with a clean, stubborn sweetness. They stood at the window, his chin in her hair, their reflection softer than last night's mirror but somehow truer. He thought of the door they had opened and felt the good kind of fear, not that it would close, but that he would now be responsible for keeping the hinges oiled. "Stay again tonight," she said. "I was already staying," he answered, and the day rearranged itself around the fact of them. Evenings became their weather. The trumpet at the Mariposa learned their names. The bartender learned their order. The rain remembered how to time its entrance. They curated rituals not because routine was romantic, but because it built a trellis for anything fragile to climb. Tuesdays were for the quiet table under the mirror. Thursdays they cooked together. Saturdays they read each other paragraphs and argued kindly about commas. Desire didn't dim under ritual, it focused. In the kitchen they moved like one body with 2 intentions. He chopped, she stirred, steam rose, hunger braided itself with affection. When his hand passed the salt, his fingers lingered just long enough to be a sentence. When she leaned past him to reach the cabinet, the brush of her shoulder wrote an answer. They were fluent in the grammar of nearness. After dinner they cleaned slowly, making the ordinary sacramental. The dish towel became a banner of peace. The clink of plates turned into a metronome their hearts learned to keep. Later, on the couch, they sprawled toward each other the way vines agree on a wall. Kisses lengthened. Laughter slipped under their ribs and stayed there, purring. The city outside was a rumor. Inside, they curated a museum of warm objects. Teacups, worn paperbacks, the lily's successive blooms. When they went to bed, they did not rush the night. Clothes unbuttoned like decisions made with care. Skin met skin with gratitude, not conquest. They learned the way each liked to be held, the altitude of a sigh, the border where a shiver becomes a yes. They made love in the closed-door way of consenting adults who value reverence over spectacle. No choreography, no audience, only breath and patience and the practice of listening with your hands. The world did not vanish, it quieted and watched them be kind. After, they lay chest to back, the most complete architecture in the simplest line. He drew invisible constellations on her shoulder. She murmured names for the stars he made up. A siren drifted by like a late thought that decided it didn't belong here. The night agreed. "Tell me something true," she said, the old game upgraded. "I'm not afraid of the word forever," he said, surprised by how little the admission weighed once spoken. "Tell me something tender," she asked. "Your laugh is a light I can carry," he said. She turned to face him in the darkness and pressed her mouth to his, sealing the words to the place they belonged. Even good weather has shifts. A morning arrived when the coffee tasted like the last sip in a cold cup, edible but not what either of them wanted to swallow. A text from an older life vibrated on his phone and turned his shoulders rigid. A question she didn't know how to ask sat in her throat and made her voice thin. The Lily dropped a petal. They didn't fight. They respectfully misread each other. He went quiet, which she had once loved. She grew brisk, which he had mistaken for strength. Hours wore their shoes down. The apartment's kind light felt too honest. "Do you need to go?" she asked, meaning 3 different things. "I don't want to," he said, meaning 4. They walked, the umbrella folded because the sky had decided to be merciful. On the pier, wind made the lake a sequined field. They talked, haltingly at first, then with the relief of people who remember they are on the same side of a problem. He confessed that he sometimes feared being known more than being alone. She confessed that she sometimes rehearsed losing people to prove she could survive it. They stood with their foreheads together like travelers reading the same complicated map. "I don't need you to be a vow," she said. "I need you to be here." "I am here," he said. "And I want the squeaky step." They went home. They made toast on purpose and laughed at how much better it was when you meant it to be burnt. They watered the lily as if the petal had fallen out of fatigue rather than omen. When they went to bed that night, they touched each other the way people do after almost losing their nerve, grateful, attentive, newly careful. What followed was not fireworks again, but the warm chorus of return. 2 bodies remembering where to fit, 2 breaths folding into one measure, the word home proving it could be a verb. After, they talked in the dark about practical things that turned out to be love wearing its work clothes. Spare keys, tax seasons, how many lilies a vase can graciously hold. They fell asleep with the window cracked and the city promising to keep the bad dreams out and the good breezes in. In the morning, the lily lifted another petal to the light. The mariposa became backdrop rather than stage, the apartment the lead. The lily finished its bloom and kept its beauty in a quieter way. They bought a small rug that didn't match anything and made everything look chosen. He oiled the door hinge because squeaks can be sweet but also exhausting. She labeled a jar for the house with the garden, and they fed it with coins, then notes, then the habit of believing. One afternoon they took a train to the edge of the city and walked until blocks turned into birds. They found a cottage with peeling paint and a mean little garden that was trying to be brave. The front door was red and chipped and kind. They didn't say ours. They said, someday, and the word didn't feel like a dodge but a horizon. Back home, rain returned, less confession now, more blessing. He cooked, she set the table, they made a calm out of ordinary plates. After dinner they didn't bother with candles. They had learned how to make light without them. Clothes loosened. Laughter arrived. They kissed the way people do who trust the aftermath. When they made love, it was the grown, grateful way again. Closed door, open hearts, no performance, full consent, heat and tenderness braided, the city outside reduced to a soft hush that felt like respect. Later, they lay in the dim and planned small rebellions. Early mornings to watch a sunrise, late nights to read one more page aloud, a lily every week even when lilies weren't in season. He told her about a postcard he'd once kept with a line about maps and promises in pencil. She pressed a pen into his palm. "Ink something," she said. He wrote on a scrap of paper, block letters steady, "Tomorrow." She took the pen, added a small arrow and the word US, neat and certain. They pinned it to the fridge like a travel plan. "Do you think we're brave?" he asked. "I think we're ordinary," she said, which is braver than it sounds. They kissed the way agreements are sealed. Rain tightened its music against the panes. The lily, almost done with its season, held itself with dignity. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she answered, and this time it wasn't a lie they chose to live with. It was a truth they had learned how to make, one soft, stubborn day at a time.